methodology and what system is being practiced in India, and few of the case studies we'll just look at it for next 45 to 50 minutes. We all know that failure of structure is a very disturbing being an engineer, and it was not existence in the past, because we discussed about durability, soundness, stability. So that's what the structure is known for. They were expected to be a permanent one. It is not a temporary. It is not supposed to fail. But in presently, what's happening is that the failure of structure is becoming more common. Although we are using very modern materials with high quality standards, and then sustainability is increased. But also we have now sophisticated analysis backed design technology. Despite of all this, we have issues having problems in structures which is already existing or even during the construction time. So all these requirements makes testing of concrete structures is a mandatory, and then we got number of codes, even our Indian standards, which makes clear that the testing has to be a practice while the concreting is being done. All the PMCs are now depending upon this testing values before you go out with further construction. So while the experts from all over the world try to determine the causes of the failure, which are apparently numerous, complex, debatable, and there is no single cause could be explained why this is happening. So every given point of time, it is better always to have a testing data with us to decide are we maintaining the quality, are we addressing the durability, are we going as per the design calculations, the design drawing given by the designer, and things like that. So there are types of disorders. If you look at it, there could be a functional disorder, or could be a structural disorder, or could be a minor disorder, chronic disorder, stabilized one, or progressive one. So all that can be decided, all that can be addressed. If we have a data with us, based on that we'll be able to construct a durable structures. So with this introduction, why we need to have the testing parameters and testing details while the construction is on, or the structure is already completed, which will give us to make the structure to be more durable, and we'll be able to address what sort of issues are on, how to rectify it, and things like that. When you get into the investigation methods, normally visual observation is most important. Our engineering judgment is going to be very, very valuable one rather than any other testing methodology. And then whatever the visual observation we have, we need to document it, and measurement of geometrical parameters of the existing members, experiments on evaluating material properties either with non-destructive testing or partially destructive testing like core extraction or the load test. And then interpretation and analysis of the test report. So what is more important in NDT or testing is that we do some testing and then we have a number, but this number has to be interpreted properly based on the requirement for what is the purpose of this testing is being done. So that's very, very important. That comes out of experience, and we do number of tests, and then we need to correlate each other test, as we cannot depend upon a single test and then take a call. So interpretation matters a lot and lot. Based on that, formulate the repair measures, and after the repair measures are over, and then you do the post repair evaluation to make sure whatever we decided and it has been implemented at site. In the visual observation, we need to look at the crack, width, depth, length, and rust draining and spalling of concrete, dampness if any, drainage, and then foundation details if it is to be addressed in case of you wanted to do retrofitting and strengthening on a global of this particular building globally. Documentation both by drawing and photographs, and we've been seeing that many building structures, when you go for an inspection which has got a distress, or they wanted to go for one more additional floors or things like that, or you wanted to increase the seismic zone, for example Chennai from zone 2 to zone 3, if you go and ask for the existing drawing detailing, even we don't get GA drawings. So that's the situation as of today. Even 10 years old building, you go and ask for a GA drawing with an engineer or an architect, it's not available. So the drawing and photograph is a very, very important documentation where it shows, we need to take the types and patterns of cracking, spalling, abnormal distress or discoloration or deformation, and history of construction, original quality, what was the grade of concrete for which it has designed, analysis and design methods with assumptions made during that particular time, and then types of materials used. When it comes to non-destructive testing, we can have a number of non-destructive testing, or you can do destructive testing like as I said earlier. And so few cases, we also go for load test when we are not able to take a call on these two. For example, precast structures, which is done with my one shuttering and things like that. And the best thing is always going for a load test to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Normally in India, they commonly adopt a non-destructive testing or as follows: ribbon hammer and penetration technique, ultrasonic pulse velocity, core drilling test to evaluate the equivalent cube compressive strength of the concrete, carbonation test, Hofstadter potential test, evaluation of chloride and pH through concrete powder sample in terms of durability to be desired, and Profoscope survey for identifying the cover, and then the rebar which is already located. As I said earlier, we don't get even GA drawings, so we don't have a structural drawing. When you wanted the address for additional load carrying capacity of the member, obviously you need to go for a proformeter survey so that you get the details of reinforcement which is available approximately. And there are a few other tests in core trepanning for finding out the loss and pre-stress, but very limited knowledge and usage is available at present. As I said by our managing director, SCRC is doing this technique, and then they are able to predict the loss and pre-stress in the concrete. The flat jack technique is being extensively used where the old masonry structures, either it could be a stone masonry or brick masonry, when you wanted to know what is the carrying capacity. Also, it can be done where you have a flat jack which is being inserted in between two brick or rock masonry mortar joint, and then later you inflate, and after that the stress goes through this, and then you have a strain gauge, and then you'll be able to get what is the stress which is being undergone at that particular point of structure. And triplet things are there, but that's not being exactly extensively being used in the industry. The non-popular non-destructive testings are also there. Thermal methods, basically we use it in waterproofing line where we have read the temperature to find out what is the moisture content and what is the temperature. The temperature is going to be high, and then there is no moisture movement, so there is no leak or dampness in that. And for those applications we can use it, but otherwise for interpretation of rehabilitation it is not possible. And radiography is being very limitedly we are using it. It is not being extensively used. Stress wave propagation method. So these above methods are we not used because simply for the reason that we have a lack of physics knowledge, the part of structural engineers, as a limitation to work as a team with a consultant based on the physics is going to be very low. Probably the research, yes, we'll be able to adopt all this, but on field we are having limitations in using these methods. Now coming to popular method which we have been using it, ribbon hammer, which every one of you might be using it, even if you are a student final year or you're a PG student, you would have done it in your project, where you've got a ribbon hammer test. It's a very common one, and this is a simple handheld device where you are measuring the hardness of the concrete with a ribbon of a spring mass loaded inside the ribbon hammer. The ribbon hammer gives you a ribbon number. The larger the higher number, the concrete has got a hot surface, which is a qualitative test. With this test, the quantifying for the FCK or grade of concrete is not advisable, because, for example, if a concrete has got carbonated, it should give a very high ribbon number, and doesn't mean that the concrete has got a very high FCK value, and then it may be having a lower grade, but you may get a higher number of ribbon. So it cannot be taken as a quantitative test, and it's only a qualitative test. The limitations, you need to have a proper preparation before you do the ribbon hammer test, because the smoothness of the surface is very, very important, and it varies with the size and shape of aggregate. For example, I'm going to use an 40 millimeter aggregate. When I'm going to heat it, I may not be heating exactly on the concrete, I may heat it on the granite stone where I would get a much higher number, but that may not be the exact strength of the concrete. And it is not suitable for the concrete which is less than 7 MPa generally, because when you heat this ribbon hammer, the energy gets dissipated at that particular point, because the concrete has got a very low strength, and obviously you will not be able to get a ribbon number, and you will not be able to predict it. Also, the degree of saturation, the surface moisture, type and size and content of aggregate and type of cement, things like that, it depends upon lot many variations. As I said earlier, the carbonation of surface produces very, very random number, and that number will not be able to decide at all. Manufacturer gives a graph, where we'll be able to give a recommendation saying that you'll be able to predict it. But the thing is, it is only specific to that particular specimen, because our concrete grade and our concrete making system and our type of concrete is totally different, from the graph which has been related to that. So we need to be very, very careful if you wanted to convert that. If you really wanted to do it, then you need to cast number of cubes and then do ribbon hammer, and then take those data, and with those data probably you can predict it. So otherwise it is not advisable to do with this graph. The second one, what we try to use is that ultrasonic pulse velocity. Again, this is also a qualitative test. Either you can go with a different technical equipment like Pandit 7 and Pandit 6. And this is how what you're trying to do is that, one transducer is going to emit the sound waves, the other is going to, receive the sound waves. And we know the distance traveled, which is the, member thickness. And we can calculate the velocity. Based on the velocity, the total provisions have been given. It was given in 13311 of part 1. Now it has been shifted to 516. The numbers are varying. We'll just look at it. Now, what is more important here is that the transducer, the frequency, what you choose matters a lot. Depends upon the path length, you need to go with the natural frequency. Lower the natural frequency is going to be the higher the distance travel. So if the thickness of the member is going to be more and more, you should always opt for a lesser frequency, natural frequency transducers. Otherwise, you may not get a proper reading. So it is just used to, generally homogeneity of the concrete can be verified with this. Presence of voids, cracks, and loss of integrity. Qualitative, as I said, and relatively, concrete conditions can be, obtained. The combination of rebar, hammer, and UPV helps us in identifying the corrosion-prone locations. For example, as it was well explained by earlier speaker, if the corrosion is going to take place, obviously it is going to have expansive forces are going to introduce, and then that pushes the cover concrete. As it pushes the cover concrete, when I'm going to do a rebar hammer test in that particular location, obviously some amount of energy gets dissipated because the gap in between the concrete and the rebar, and you get a lower number. Similarly, when you go with the rebar hammer test, as the gap exists in between the rebar and the concrete, and your UPV value is also going to be very low. In the other areas where the rebars are not there, if you get a better value, and then where the rebar presence, you get a lower value, and also you get a rebar number very low, obviously we can infer that you get a corrosion has already got initiated. There are three methods which can be done is UPV. One is a direct method, semi-direct, and then indirect method. This is a direct method where you are going to keep probes on either side of it, right on that, facing each other, where the calculation of the path length will be easier. The other one is going to be semi-direct. You will keep one probe on the other side of it, the second receiver probe on the other face of the concrete, where you need to calculate the hypotenuse and then take it as that the concrete is expected, the waves are expected to go through the hypotenuse, and then you take that as a path length and then decide the velocity of the concrete. This is the indirect method where both the probes are kept in the same surface of it. When you go for an indirect method, the code allows you to add, maybe about 0.5 kilometer per second to 1 kilometer per second as an additional value. If it is concrete is going to be sound, waves are going to travel straight forward, and we get the velocity. If you've got a reinforcing bar, heavily congested rebar in the concrete, and then sound waves, to travel through the rebar, and then you get in a very much higher velocity, and you need to be very cautious when you wanted to take these values as a concrete velocity or not. So you need to find out, use a profoscope, and then see to that you are avoiding the rebar maximum location, so that you don't get a value which is not actually represent the quality of the concrete. If it is going to be a shallow crack, and the waves always will travel through an alternative path, and it takes a longer time, and then the velocity will get reduced. If it is going to be narrow, some of the cracks, some of the waves partially gets reflected, and otherwise it gets transmitted back, and then you don't get it at all. If a crack is going to be wide, obviously the hole will be reflected, and then you will not get any signal at all. Otherwise, in the narrow crack, you get an unstable reading, but here you will not get any readings at all. If you've got voids and micro cracks, and sound waves may not travel around across them, and then you will get an unstable reading. But again, here what happens is, if the concrete is completely saturated with water, even though it has got a voids and micro cracks, still you will be able to get a higher value because you got a conductive medium, and then it may not be the right value at all. So you need to check maybe one in the morning or probably one in the afternoon, and then compare these two. If the values are not going to be varying, then you can take this as a value. The code gives you the spacing between of the points. 300 millimeters under the center is a grid point. We are supposed to have it, and then take this reading. And then if we normally use aquatic coupling, that side normally we go with the grease. Of course, manufacturer also gives you acoustic coupling, which is very expensive. Normally you can go with the grease. The whole purpose is we don't want any gap or any void between the concrete surface and the transit diesel, because however the grinding we do, the flatness will not be able to make exactly. So we need to use some gel, which could be a petroleum gel, so that we make the contact proper. And transmitting this pulse, and then other one receives it, and then we'll be able to calculate the velocity. And once you calculate the velocity, it can be inferred with IS 13311 earlier. If it is going to be above 4.5, the concrete quality is good, and between 3.5 to 4.5, excellent, and 3.5 to 4.5 good, and so on. But now the code has revised, and the earlier one did not talk about the grade of concrete. The present guideline, what has been given is, if your concrete is above M25 grade, if the velocity is more than 4.5 kilometers, then it is excellent. 3.75 to 4.5, it is good. Below 3.75, it is doubtful. So if you look at the earlier guideline, the below 3 is only doubtful. If it is between 3 to 3.5, it is medium, and 3.5 to 4 was good. But now, if a grade of concrete is more than M25, if the velocity is less than 3.5 kilometers per second, your concrete is doubtful. And in case of concrete up to 3.25, the value is less than 3.5 is doubtful. So the quality in the PMCs, we've been practicing. A lot of PMC consultants are coming to India from abroad, and we started slowly tightening the specifications. And one of that is this: the concrete is anything less than 3.5 is not acceptable if it is M25. So we cannot apply 13311 and saying that M3 is all right. Core test is another one where exactly we get the FCK value of the concrete. For example, you wanted to add one more floor, or you wanted to upgrade the structure from CSB zone 2 to zone 3, then obviously the designer need to know the reinforcement detailing and also the core. So we need make FCK value. For that, the best is the core. So many a times low strength issue comes in picture, where the cubes are not passed. So obviously we need to clear the cube strength. So we need to go have a core and then test it, or estimate the in-place strength of the concrete and correlate with other NDT methods. For example, I wanted to rebar hammer and UPV in many places, but I'll not be able to do core. A number of cores cannot be much more. So what you can do is that you can take about 9 cores or 10 cores, and then take rebar hammer number and then UPV, and then you can take this as a base data, and rest of the other places you do the rebar hammer and then UPV, and then you'll be able to use this as a correlation. Yes, the grade of concrete or FCK value of the concrete may be expected to do this. And sometimes you use this for doing the petrographic evaluation, because now you get aggregates which are more reactive. Then we need to be very careful, otherwise we'll have AR and alkali aggregate reaction issues will come. Estimate general and internal condition of the concrete, and then get information about the carbonation depth, density, and so on. For those, we use this code. Now coming to number of tests, how many cores we need to extract depends upon an objective. Suppose if you wanted to have quantify the strength of the concrete, or the cube issues are there, then you need to have at least minimum 3 cores, where that will be able to take the average of it and then find out derive what is going to be your FCK value of the concrete. If it is going to be in place strength, and as many as possible, that depends upon which are all the members we are going to address, and based on that we will be able to do that. And this is a system. Normally the core is being extracted with the diamond fitted wheel, and minimum diameter of the core should be 94 millimeter, or 2 times of the maximum size of the aggregate. But at field, the 69 mm is what being used by us and many other consulting companies. Reason behind is we use the rebar. The rebar spacing is normally comes about 75 millimeter maximum. So in between 94 millimeter will not be able to do, so that we want to avoid cutting of this reinforcement. So we go for 64 millimeter. The L by D ratio is 2 preferred. It can be between 1.9 to 2.1. In case if it is not, for example, the slab thickness itself is going to be only 100 millimeter or 120 millimeter, where I'm going to use a 69 millimeter diameter core, I'll not be able to get the L by D ratio 2, but you can as well use the correction factor which has been given in IS 516. So as per IS 516 or as per ASTM 39, you can use L by D, it should be 2, and cores with embedded reinforcement should be avoided as maximum as possible. But when you go for bridge structures, when you go for decks, obviously it is inevitable that sometimes you need to cut the rebar too. So better to use a rebar locator before going for cutting core. So correlation factor as per IS 516, if L by D is not going to be, 2, you can use this correlation factor. And normally once you take the core from the side and then you have to trim it for the blindness and either side of it, and then do the ultrasonic pulse velocity as we discussed earlier. It is always better before you test this course to have the number of data available with you so that you can correlate it with the other values, and then do the capping. Normally we do the sulfur capping so that you can avoid the curing time, and you can do the testing as max at the earliest. So this is how it has been done. And once it has been done, then you correlate with that, and then you give your cube compressive strength. Now, when it comes to acceptance criteria, the average strength should not be less than 85%. If suppose you take 3 cores, the average of these 3 core values should not be less than 85% of your cube strength. And not even a single core should have less than 75% of your cube strength. If these 2 things are there, then you can go. This is what been specified in IS 456 clause 17.4.3. As we take as a cylinder, and whatever the FCM, the value you get it, you can multiply it by 1.25 to get your equivalent cube strength after applying your correction factor. Also, SPS 24 says, if your diameter of the core is less than 100 millimeter, you can add 8% strength, whatever you obtain from the core which you use, maybe 69 millimeter diameter or so. So these are all the acceptance criteria when you go for it. Carbonation, it is well explained by the professor. When you're going to have a carbonated concrete, obviously it is going to reduce the pH value, and the pH value get reduced, it results in corrosion. It's a very simple test. This cannot be used as a test even for NDT package. I would recommend, as I'm in the industry of repair and rehabilitation for so many years, this should be a package of a repair contractor itself, because a very simple test, what all that you are going to do is that you are just going to spray some pinophthalene. The moment you spray the pinophthalene, what happens is the concrete changes in pink color immediately. If it turns in pink in color, you've got minimum alkalinity. Otherwise, the concrete has already lost its alkalinity and it results in corrosion. Generally, what happens, the specification when you write for the repair and rehabilitation, chip up the cover concrete until you get the sound concrete. We discussed earlier that when the concrete has got carbonated, it has got a very high sound in physical parameters. That's the reason we get a high rebound number value. When I have got a concrete which is high strength as far as the physical parameters are concerned, but chemically this concrete is not good to have it. So if I keep that concrete and then try to do the repair methodology either with the micro concreting or with a polymer modified mortar, my repair system is going to fail because I'm leaving the contaminated concrete in between the micro concrete and the parent concrete. So it is always better during the repair stage also, we need to have this pinophthalene indicator, keep spraying it, check up, you get the change in color. Otherwise, you have to chip further till you get this change in color and then do it. So this test is very simple, and this gives you the pH value of the concrete. So for this particular case, your carbonated is about 40-45 millimeter. If I'm going to simply remove only 25 millimeter, I get a sound concrete, and then if I leave it as it is, again, that's not going to be the right methodology. The other one is a Hofstad potential test. There are 2 types we can do it. One is a copper sulfate and silver chloride electrodes. Normally what being used in this is a copper sulfate as per the ASTM C876. What we are trying to do is that we are just trying to estimate the electrical corrosion potential to determine the corrosion activity of the reinforcing bar. So this is what being done. What all that we are trying to do is that chip open the cover concrete, connect the rebar, and then connect this copper concrete with an electrolyte where you use a copper sulfate as your electrode, and then you have the copper sulfate as your electrolyte, and then you connect these 2 and then measure what is the correction activity which takes place. In this case, this is 366 and the other one is 421. Now ASTM C876 is given you a guidelines. If it is going to be more than minus 350 milliwatt, then your corrosion is going to be very high, maybe about more than 95%. If it is going to be between 200 to 350, 50%. If it is less than 200 millivolt, it is going to be 5%. So rate of corrosion is not much. The other one is to be done to the laboratory, but still the samples has been collected. We have to test for the chloride test and then sulfate test. See, normally the chloride test, what is very, very important is, suppose I just wanted to estimate the chloride level in the concrete existing structure. I just draw one simple level, maybe about 40 millimeter I drill and then collect the chloride sample and then test it. I get a value. I cannot depend upon this value. It is always better to go for incremental. Suppose 0 to 25 millimeter, 25 to 50 millimeter, 50 to 75 millimeter. Or if the structure is going to be very, very important, you can as well go 0 to 10 millimeter, 10 to 20 millimeter, because we exactly want to know up to what depth the chloride ions are got penetrated. Only those that level concrete needs to be removed. Or otherwise, let's take a condition: the chloride ions are got penetrated up to 25 millimeter. I draw sample up to 40 millimeter, and this 25 millimeter sample, 40 millimeter sample got mixed together. When I do the test at lab, I'll not be able to get exactly what is the concentration of chloride ions in that. So it is always better to go for different depth to get and to write your specification up to what depth you need to remove the concrete cover thickness, because chloride ions, chloride induced corrosion are more dangerous. It was very well explained by Professor. And as per IS 456, up to 0.6 kg per cubic meter is allowable, not an issue. That was also well explained by Professor. Why some amount of chloride ion initial value need not be alarming to the concrete. When it goes beyond that, then you have the issues with the chloride. If your pH value is going to be greater than 11.5 and you've got very low chloride content, then your structure is not expected to corrode fast. If the pH value is very high, but your chloride content is also very high, then obviously the structure is expected to corrode. And low pH value, this is acidic in nature, again low chloride content, but still, although the chloride content is low, but your pH value is also equally low, obviously the concrete will corrode. And low pH, high chloride, nevertheless, we don't have to say anything. Obviously, the structure is bound to corrode. The other test which we use it is a proformeter survey. Normally, we use it for locating the rebar. Sometimes where you wanted to take some core for taking some pipelines or AC lines and things like that, we use it to avoid cutting the rebar. And to find out the diameter of the rebar, we use this. And then also to find what is the depth of the cover at that particular region, we need to use this cover meter survey. So this is how it looks like. Two types of there. One is a proformeter, other is a profoscope proformeter, where you got a scanner separately, and then in a profoscope scanner, and that comes together, where you will be able to find out what is the diameter of the bar, which works in a non-destructive pulse induction. It is insensitive to external interferences, and to check the cover thickness, rebar position, and diameter of the bar. In this particular case, you find 75, which is which shows the cover thickness of the particular member. If the cover thickness is going to be much lower than what has been specified, then we need to take a call whether we need to go for any protective coating over the cover concrete so that the durability of the structure is extended. Again, you can infer that suppose you got a required cover thickness and the good quality, and it is not a corrosion prone. The required cover thickness is there, but the bad quality, for example, I do ribbon hammer and I do this, I have a required cover thickness, let's say 40 millimeter is required, 40 millimeter I have, but my ribbon hammer value is giving a very low, but cover quality is bad. Obviously, it results in corrosion. I have very less cover thickness, but quality of concrete is good, but still I will not be able to, be sure that it will not corrode, but obviously it is going to have a corrosion prone member. The other last one, which what we do is that the pile integrity test. Nowadays, the pile integrity test being mandatory, 10% of the number overall pile generally is being tested for the pile integrity test. What we get out of here is that we get the pile necking or bulging, and also we also get the what is the depth of the pile which has been done. It's simple. We are passing through the waves. These waves are traveling through the concrete. The moment it goes to the toe of the pile, it reaches the soil medium. As it reaches a different media, the reflection of the wave pattern is going to be totally different. So based on that, we'll be able to calculate what is going to be the length of the pile. The only limitation what you have got is the L by D ratio of the pile. If it is going to be more than 45 to 50, then we will not be adopt this test. And the interpretation of this is involves not only on the concrete knowledge, but also on the soil parameters, because when you got a different layered soils are there, then interpretation of this involves more and more soil and concrete interface detail. The pile length what we get is approximately about 5 to 10%, because what we do here is that we assume that the quality of the concrete is an X, and then we fix the velocity of the concrete, let's say 4 kilometer per second, and then we try to evaluate this. So based on that, if the concrete is not 4 kilometer per second, and then we have a different values. So the length of the pile 5 to 10% may vary. So if it is going to be a good pile, this is how that the toe of the pile you get a deep reflection, and then you know what is the depth of the pile. If you already have different issues like nicking or bulging, then you will have a number of different reflections. You will not be able to make it. The last one, suppose we are not able to identify because of all this. The only question is, the thing is the load test has to be done. You do the load test. Normally, we go with a water, which is very easy for loading and also for removing the load. But practically, many a times the contractors does not prefer to go for this because it results in something else also. When I'm trying to do a load test with the water, it results in leaking, and then one more NC is getting created outside. Unfortunately, now we are getting these enzymes in pre-packed bags. Maybe 50 kg bags and 40 kg bags are available. So it is easy for you to load these bags for the load test, and you can load it uniformly too, and keep the dial gauge and check whether it is going to be within the permissible deflection. Then if it is so, you can put the structure into use. What are the stages at which we do practically at site is that it is done during construction and immediately after construction, or for assessment for repair and rehabilitation, or for structural stability and enhancement of load carrying capacity, fire damage, and post repair evaluation. These are all the stages at which where we do the testing of entity or partially destructive test are being done. Now we can wonder, during construction, it is being now extensively, people are trying to resort to rebound hammer, where you got number of inches. For example, your cube has failed. Unless or else your cube results are attached along with your invoice, you will not be paid. The contractor will not be paid. When the cube is failing, obviously you need to close that NC. For that we use it. Or you have got an O or surface quality or honeycomb, or you have done a repair already. You wanted to establish the system of repair what has been adopted is good, and such cases we do. So in this particular case, the cube has failed, core has been extracted, again core has also failed. Again, they went for a number of cores, they increased, and all the cores have failed, did not meet the requirement of the clause 17.4.3 of IS 456. So that resulted completely in removing the concrete and then redo with a new. And of course, the designer again did not accept for this because it's a flat slab design, and they said that we will not be able to accept the steel because the dead load of the steel concrete has been already suffered by the steel. So the strain in the steel has already taken place. So they removed the steel also, and then they went for new concreting. When you get a poor surface like this in a thermal power plant, the chimney, you have a surface like this. And when you have surface, we wanted to make sure whether it is really only on the surface or the core concrete is also having some issues. Then we need to go for ultrasonic pulse velocity to make sure that you don't have a problem in the core concrete. When you extract a concrete core, this is how the concrete quality was that. The second, immediately after construction, we do what we do that to settle the future dispute between civil and other discipline of engineering. For example, if it is going to be a thermal power station and TG decks and TG columns are there, when the turbo generators have been erected over this over these columns and then the beams, and when it is going to have a vibration, to avoid the dispute where the mechanical engineers coming and blaming the civil engineers, this vibration is on account because of the concrete or concrete member, or civil engineers blaming it is because of the vibration is due to the TG. To avoid that, the best practice is that all the TG columns and then TG deck being done with an ultrasonic pulse velocity well in advance, and then prove that the concrete is of good quality. Absolutely, there's no issues about it, and then we can hand it over to the other engineering faculty so that they'll be able to do it. And one of the TG deck thermal power stations, this is how they are talking about cover concrete, given the rebars are exposed and things like that. It involves your non-destructive test strengths. And this sort of a scenario, you need to go for a core. There's no point in doing ultrasonic pulse velocity also. The assessment of repair and rehabilitation, including accidents and failures, we use it for this repair. To arrive at proper repair and rehabilitation methodology, then we need to do a number of non-destructive testing. and then come to a conclusion what needs to be done in terms of repair and rehabilitation. In case of failures due to accidents or poor maintenance, also we do. For example, corrosion affected chemical factory, and then the hydropower station, which was not functioning since construction. This is at a place called Kangan near Kashmir, about 50 kilometers away from Kashmir, to arrive what is what went wrong, why we not able to operate it. So bridge structures, all the bridge structures, we all know that NH is living for a boot system. So before accepting it, the companies wanted to do the assessment of the condition assessment of the bridge structures and then do it. This is when you go underneath the bridge, the main beam, you can find this is a condition. Absolutely, cover concrete is completely sparred and corrosion is very severe. So these sort of bridges obviously needs to be done. And marine structures, marine structures, if you look at it, we used to literally wonder how these sort of damages can take place. For example, this damage, mooring dolphin at a port, a barge comes and hits this, and then one pile is completely, missed. So now you need to go for non-destructive testing and then design. Similarly, this is at Simadri. Again, barge came and hit during the cyclone. One of the column number 20 is completely, missed out, and then we need to go for testing on this. This is the docks of jetties. Normally, this is being done on a very regular interval. This particular dock is at the Haldia dock complex, where we have extensive corrosion, because this particular place we have got both chloride induced corrosion and also the microbial induced corrosion, the MIC, where we have to do a periodical testing and then monitor the corrosion levels in the concrete structures, so that you don't lose the structures in one fine day, and then you do the precautionary measures. Now you can find out the catwalk, the pile, there's no concrete cover at all, it is completely delaminated, and the corrosion in the piles and pile muffs are there. You can find the complete pile is entire rebar. You don't have to do any proforma survey, you'll be able to even draw a structural detailing of it. So similar corrosions are very extensive in marine structures. So this needs to be done for Hofstede potential survey, and then the chloride content test, and you have a periodical maintenance also. The other one is the structural stability or enhancement of the load carrying capacity. Maybe your whole structural drawing have got no GA detailing, but you wanted to increase the load carrying capacity of the member, then we need to go for core extraction and then do proforma survey, which details will be given to the designer as his input, so that he does the modeling and then do it. Also due to microzoning, as I said earlier, buildings getting upgraded from one seismic zone to other seismic zone, then you need to go for. Recently, we did one extensive thing for Sun TV group, the Nagaran building, where that building was designed about 30 years ago for zone 2. Now they wanted to upgrade it to zone 3. We did all that, and then we were able to give the repair methodology, and it was successfully completed. This particular building, again, they wanted to increase the structural capacity of a few members, where we have done this testing. We did this ribbon number, ultrasonic pulse velocity, core, and then your profoscope survey, so that we get the FCK value, and then we get the reinforcement detailing, and then do the analysis. Also for qualitative, we did the ribbon number and then ultrasonic pulse velocity. As far as the reinforcement, as far as the foundation is concerned, dig and then check what is the size of your footing, and then you give those details also as an input for the designers. So these are all the tests which we normally do. And again, I reinstate that these tests will give you a number. This is all about a number game. And then based on this number, you need to use your engineering judgment to decide what could have gone wrong, and then how I can take these numbers for my design and other parameters. I just go with few case studies. 11:56, I think I got another 10 minutes to go. So quality assessment of a structural hydropower project, the power project which I said about 50 kilometers away from Srinagar. There are about 3 units of 30 megawatt. It is constructed in the year 1983 and started construction, completed in 1998 due to the local issues. We all know that Kashmir issues, what's happening. Only 1 unit started functioning, 2 units were not functioning till 2004, although it was completed in 1998. The whole issue was they had a very excessive vibration. Because of the vibration, the bearings got all the time problem, and then they could not go. So vibration studies have been done. Ultrasonic pulse velocity, ribbon hammer, and chemical tests have been done. This is UPV and chloride. All that has been done. See, now what happens as far as the columns are concerned, the UPV values are very good. Absolutely, there was no issue. And sulfates are well within the limit. pH value was good. Chlorides are very well within the limits. Absolutely not a problem. The whole issue, the UPV test clearly indicated that the 8 concrete pedestal supporting the starter and support pad got a lot of unstable readings with the UPV values, which shows very clearly the grouting of the bolt packets in the pedestal not done properly, and that resulted in this excessive vibration and resulted in failure of this. So the repair was done in 2005, and SCRC completed the post-repair investigations in 2006. And investigation demonstrated the repair methodology as well as execution adopted was perfect. The UPV values are very good, and all the 3 units are put into use in the year 2006. Until today, it is functioning absolutely. There is no problem. This is a rehabilitated pedestal, and this is all the UPV values has been done. And if you look at it, the maximum was 4.54, and average was 4.14, and then it was certified for the usage, and it went on well. So condition assessment of the bridge, and this bridge again, it was washed off during a flood, and then they had other related issues. It's a pre-stressed concrete girder and deck slab, and reinforced concrete piers and abutment. The well foundation was adopted in that. Visual inspection was done, including the bridge bearing, ultrasonic pulse velocity, ribbon hammer, core extraction, and determination of chlorides and sulfates are done. So this is what, as being it is a PVC girder, your regular core extraction cannot be done. So the special system was adopted by SCRC to find out what is the loss in pre-stress. This is how the testing has been done. As we said, core trepanning method was adopted by SCRC to find out the loss pre-stress, because there we cannot go for straightforward core extraction. And based on that, they analyzed what is the loss in pre-stress. And chemical analysis was done for chloride and sulfate. Chloride, you can find it is a little higher than the threshold limits in few locations, and other locations are well within the limit. So finally, as it is being an pre-stress bridge, it has been adopted with an external pre-stressing to have it as a rehabilitation methodology. And later the load testing was done, and it was certified for putting into use. The other case study, a condition assessment of concrete and RC structural elements of an LPG berth and outer harbor of port truss. You can find, harbor, you get number of structures, mooring dolphins, and then firefighting structures, and central unloading platforms, breasting structures, and a number of structures here. But if you look at all the structures, almost all the structures will have a similar issue, where corrosion is going to be the major issue. And number of times we come across one issue that, how many structures has to be done. Suppose I have a particular structure, how many points I need to do ribbon hammer, how many cores I need to take, these sort of things. Suppose, for example, a marine structure, now core is not that much important for us, because we know that durability is going to be an issue. So we always opt for more of Hofstall potential, UPV, and then chloride and pH value is going to be predominantly decide your repair methodology. So the different structures, you decide numbers, and then you go for a visual observation, and whether the spalling is taking place already or only crack has taken place. Suppose if you have got a steel liner, and what was the original thickness of the steel liner, and what is the thickness now, and should we maintain the same steel liner, or we can remove it completely and then redo it. For example, now the stirrups are visible. This is how the steel liner condition. You can find the steel liner is completely gone, and then even the stirrups are visible over outside. And you will get cracks on the top deck of the slab. On central loading platform, and these are all the visual observation, what all we have been noticing it. What's more important, your visual observation is very, very important. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to infer these values with the data, what you get from that data. It's a typical, view where you get in any marine structure. What we do is that we do the ribbon hammer test, and you do ultrasonic pulse velocity, extract the core, and then do Hofstall potential, which is very, very important. as far as the marine structures are concerned, and then powder sample collection and do this at lab and then come to a conclusion what you are going to design. Now UPV is good, and then the quality of concrete near surface is good to very good with the ribbon hammer, and then you also extract core where you get the values of 31 to 47 MPa or 48 MPa. But if you look at your Hofstall potential readings, which are almost minus 350 everywhere, and your chloride content is minus 0.61 kgs to 8.43 kgs as maximum, and you are going to have corrosion. Based on it, you give your repair methodology, what you are going to do, whether you are going to have only repair and rehabilitation, repair and strengthening, or you are going to do rehabilitation also. We need to have one basic classification. Suppose in your repair methodology, if you are going to give durability also being addressed, then you can call it as a rehabilitation. Otherwise, you can call it as repair, retrofitting, or strengthening. So that's how it is being done. Do the pre-survey of Hofstall and UPV, do surface preparation, provide shear connectors, additional reinforcement, provide formwork, and provide galvanic anodes. Now, as a professor said already, there are a number of methods are available, but the present the industry is using galvanic methods very handy, because one of the biggest advantages here is not only addressing the corrosion is easy, but also monitoring the corrosion levels are much easy in this. If time permits, I'll just show one case study. Otherwise, I'll skip that, and then go with the micro concreting, do with the protective curing compound, protective coating. If you want to address durability, then you give a protective coating. Otherwise, you can leave it as such. If you're going to go your corrosion protection system with that anode, then go with a monitoring box also, so that you'll be able to monitor it. And based on that, you can provide what is the bill of quantity, and you'll be able to estimate it. And this is a minor bridge. And similarly, same levels of your visual observation. Based on that, you decide how many points you are going to do, and then take out the values. Based on those values, you are going to give a repair methodology, and then finish off your estimation too. This repair methodology adopted for this particular bridge structures. Remove the damaged concrete, grout with low viscous epoxy resin, and then application of anti-corrosive coating and application of DS40 dry spray mortar, because the bridges used will not be able to go with the regular micro concrete jacketing, and then curing is being done. For a minor one, you can as well go with either dry spray mortar, or you can go as well with your polymer modified mortar, then finish off your bill of quantity. The most site, only the routine NDT being done, because a combination of several factors are to be taken into account. The limitation of test and equipment are also as well. For example, if I'm going to do with a Profometer or Profoscope, the manufacturer says the bar diameter what is being indicated by the Profometer or Profoscope will vary 25 plus or minus. So I cannot take the same value. Probably I can take one diameter less and then do the analysis, so that you will be able to come to a conclusion. Yes, even with one diameter less, I'm able to satisfy the requirements. And experience has shown that utilizing some advanced technique is until you fully understand the physics of it, whatever we are trying to infer may not be as good as. So these members can be done with a non-destructive testing, and you get a number, and these numbers has to be decided based on your engineering judgment, and single NDT test will not be able to give you the right solution. So you have to go with a combination of different non-destructive testing to come to a conclusion what needs to be addressed and how we are going to do a repair methodology. With this, I just conclude my presentation on NDT. As I said, this particular structure hardly 3 years old, but it has got a lot of corrosion in the columns, mainly also underneath the your sunken portions, and it has got about 8 hours of each 17 floors. When you go for a non-destructive testing, the Hofstall values are varying somewhere around minus 357 to 402, but carbonation is only 10 millimeters, that too only in the basement 2 level, where the cars have been parked and then number of vehicles have been used. But the chloride content, if you look at it, it is 1.5 kgs, 1.05 kg to 2.52 kg. This sort of a situation where the concrete making, while making the concrete itself, the water has got a lot of chloride. So whole core concrete has got a chloride content, where you will not be able to remove the chloride contaminated concrete and go with a new one. So best thing is to go only with a sacrificial anode system. So what you do is that you just do the profoscope, check where the main rebar is there, chip off, and then space these anodes, tie these anodes, and then check the connectivity between the anode and the rebar. The connectivity must be very, very essential. Otherwise, these anodes will not function. But for all given purposes, the connectivity, the rebars are there, because otherwise the stress flow will not take place. In this particular case, you can find one of the columns anode has been installed. The connectivity between the rod and the anode, the other column has been tested, which is that. You can very well calculate the spacing based on the steel density ratio as explained by Professor Raji sir already, and then you'll be able to do that, and you can monitor this also. In this particular case, we don't have to go for any test like I wanted to do with the proformator survey, or I wanted to go with the core cutting, or I want to go with an UPV. Nothing is required. It is very clear. The water which has been used as contained chloride. So what all that we want to do is that we want to check what is the chloride content in the concrete at present, whether within the permissible limit or not. And second, what is the depth of the chloride ions are there. When you keep drilling more and more and more, it's found that the entire concrete has got chloride. So it is not possible. You have to go only for the system like this. To arrive this sort of a repair methodology, NDT tests are very, very useful. With this, I thank the